I am James Hanley, and my investigative journalism case study will be on Gareth Jones in 1932 and how he uncovered the Holodomor in Ukraine. Although I have chosen an event that is from 90 years ago, I think this story holds striking similarities to today's world. It is also interesting to look at how admirable investigative journalists were back then, putting their lives in danger on the front lines without any of the modern tools that we use today. So, what was the Holodomor? It translates to death by starvation. And after the Soviet Union's revolution, Stalin needed to show the Western world the power of communist countries during this global depression. And he instigated a collectivization on farms in the Soviet Union and places such as Ukraine, where lands and produce, mainly grain, was taken from wealthy farmers known as kulaks and given to the major cities. And they even gave some of the grains, they exported grains to poverty-stricken countries just to show their wealth, although it was false. Protesters were killed or sent to gulags, and the people left behind starved. This all happened between 1931 and 1933, and it is estimated that 8 million people died within the Soviet Union, with 3 million of those being Ukrainians. Stalin and the Soviet Union denied the famine ever existed. So quickly, who was Gareth Jones? He was a Welsh journalist born in 1905 just outside Cardiff. He was very into language, mainly due to his mother working in Ukraine before he was born, so that's how he learned Russian. And he also studied French and German while in Trinity College, Cambridge. An important job he got was that he was the foreign advisor for the former British Prime Minister Lloyd George, and he was also a freelance journalist. This later added authenticity to his work by Lloyd George being associated with him. He became the first foreign journalist to interview Adolf Hitler and Joseph Goebbels, and he warned the British government of an impending war with them. That would also have been in the early 1930s. He visited the Soviet Union 3 times between 1931 and 33. He wrote articles each time detailing his worries for the Soviet Union and unsure on their wealth. But only on the third occasion did he write using his name without equivocation about the famine, becoming the first journalist, the Western journalist, to do that. So most importantly, we can focus on his investigation in Ukraine the third time in 1933. So he had heard rumors of a state-induced famine, and after a few days of speaking privately to journalists and officials in Moscow, he was offered a trip to Ukraine to visit a tractor factory. On his way, he slipped off the train and he walked through 20 villages in the Ukraine countryside, collecting interviews, pictures, and most importantly, keeping a diary of what he saw. He detailed in his diary that there was many people that told him that they had not seen bread in many months and how they had extended bellies from their starvation. He covered about 40 miles before he was caught by Soviet forces and detained. Luckily, he was only kicked out of the Soviet Union. After being kicked out, he will face the ethical dilemma of putting his fellow journalists, those stationed in the Soviet Union, in danger by spreading the truth. But after returning to Berlin, he issued a press release about the genocide he had witnessed. He later made 3 news articles published mainly in the Manchester Guardian, with some in the New York Evening Post. These articles were denounced by Stalin and many Western journalists in the Soviet Union, including Eugene Lyons and the Pulitzer Prize winner Walter Duranty. He branded them as lies and as a big scare story. Duranty also coined the term, "you can't make an omelette without breaking a few eggs," when he was speaking about the hunger that people were facing, but he did not consider it starvation. Jones later wrote a rebuttal in the preceding months, and he used corroborating reports from fellow journalists in Ukraine. He was then charged with espionage and banned from the USSR. After being ostracized in the media for many months, he interviewed the world press baron Randall Hearst and was able to subsequently make speeches at world fairs in America. He then traveled into Asia and into Japan, where in 1935, while in Japan occupied Mongolia, he was murdered, and this was suspected to be done by the Soviet secret police. And here are some of the references that I use.